Some stories find us when we need them most. This is a tale about second chances for a dog who had every reason to give up, and for the family who opened their door on the coldest morning of the year. It's about what happens when broken things find each other. About the courage it takes to trust again after trust has been betrayed. And about how sometimes saving another life is really about saving our own. If you've ever felt invisible, or wondered if your best days were behind you, this story is for you, because hope has a way of showing up when we least expect it sometimes, with 4 legs and a whole lot of heart. Sarah Miller hadn't slept through the night since August. 3 months now. 3 months of waking at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., her body still tuned to a rhythm that no longer existed. For 19 years, some part of her had always been listening. For Jake's footsteps in the hallway, for his car pulling into the driveway past curfew, for the small sounds that meant her son was home, was safe, was still hers. Now the house held only silence. She stood at the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in her hands, watching frost crawl across the glass like slow fingers. The coffee maker had gurgled and hissed its familiar tune at 5:30, filling the kitchen with that burnt, bitter smell she'd known for 40 years. Outside. Darkness. January darkness, thick and absolute. The kind that pressed against windows and made the world feel smaller. The porch light was still on. She kept meaning to turn it off before bed. Kept forgetting. Or maybe she didn't forget. Maybe some part of her couldn't bear to let the darkness win completely. 4:47 a.m. The radiator pipes ticked and groaned like old bones, settling the same sounds this house had made since Tom's father built it in '62. Tom was still asleep upstairs. She could hear his soft snoring through the floor, steady as a heartbeat. 40 years of marriage. And she still found that sound comforting, even now, even when everything else felt wrong. Movement. Sarah blinked, set down her cup. Something on the porch, a shadow against the snow. At first she thought it was leaves, a pile of frozen leaves blown against the door by yesterday's wind. The temperature had dropped to 17 degrees overnight. Wind chill near zero. Everything that could freeze had frozen. The pile shifted. Sarah's breath caught. Not leaves. She moved to the window, pressed her hand against the cold glass. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the pre-dawn gray. A dog. A German shepherd, lying curled against the base of the front door. So thin she could see ribs, even through the matted fur. Ice crystals clung to the animal's muzzle. Its ears, the ridge of its spine. It lay absolutely still except for the faint rise and fall of breathing. And beneath it, tucked against its belly. Pressed into the hollow of its body, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Puppies, 3 of them, tiny, eyes closed, barely moving, the dog male. She could see now. A male had curled himself around them like a shield, like a wall between them and the cold. His body was the only warmth they had. He wasn't moving, couldn't move. Maybe. He looked like he'd used up everything he had just getting here. But his eye was open, one eye, tracking her through the glass, watching. No fear in that eye, no aggression, no plea. Just a question. Will you help them? Sarah didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't consider that she was 56 years old. That her husband had a heart condition, that they hadn't had a pet since Jake was in middle school, that this was someone else's problem, someone else's responsibility. She walked to the door. The knob was cold, so cold it burned her palm. She turned it anyway. The door swung open. Cold air hit her face like a slap, stealing her breath. 17 degrees. Wind chill near zero. The dog had been out here all night. The puppies had been out here all night. They should be dead. By every reasonable measure, they should be dead. They weren't. Sarah knelt on the porch, her nightgown soaked through instantly where her knees touched the frozen boards. She didn't notice, didn't care. The smell hit her first wet fur, something metallic like old pennies, and underneath it all, something she recognized from her years of teaching. Fear, the smell of a creature who had been afraid for a very long time. Up close, the dog was worse than she'd thought. Fur matted with ice and dirt and something darker old blood. Maybe, or mud. Ribs sharp as blades beneath the skin. A ring of raw, hairless flesh around his neck scarring. She realized old scarring. From a rope or chain tied too tight for too long. His paws were cracked and bleeding, the pads worn down to raw flesh. How far had he walked? How long had he been running, and where had the puppies come from? They were too young to be his, too small. Their eyes still sealed shut, maybe 2 weeks old, 3 at most, someone else's litter, someone else's cast-offs. He must have found them, must have picked them up from wherever they'd been abandoned and carried them. All the way here, through the snow and the cold and the darkness. This broken, starving animal had carried 3 orphaned puppies to the one porch in the county where the light was still on. Sarah reached out slowly, her hand hovered over his muzzle. No growl, no flinch. Her fingers touched the top of his head. Ice crystals melted against her skin. Beneath the matted fur, she felt bone. Just bone. The dog exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty him completely. His eye closed, his tongue dry, cracked. Pale brushed against her wrist. Once. Barely there. Then he went still. Sarah's heart stopped. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She pressed her hand against his chest, felt it rise. Faintly, barely, but rising. Still alive, still fighting. "Tom," her voice cracked the morning silence like breaking glass. She heard the thump of feet hitting the floor upstairs, the heavy tread of her husband's footsteps on the stairs. "Sarah." "What?" Tom Miller appeared in the doorway. 58 years old, gray-haired, former fire captain, 32 years with the Cedar Falls Department. He'd seen things that would break most people. Pulled bodies from car wrecks, carried children from burning buildings. Held dying strangers' hands while waiting for ambulances that wouldn't arrive in time. He stopped when he saw her, his wife, on her knees on the frozen porch, cradling a dying dog's head in her lap, 3 puppies pressed against her stomach, tucked under the hem of her robe. "Call Dr. Hayes," Sarah said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. "Now." Tom hesitated. She could see him calculating the practicality of it, the impossibility of it. All the reasons this was a bad idea. "Sarah, we can't. Now. Tom." In 40 years of marriage, Tom had learned to recognize the moments when his wife would not bend. When the school board tried to cut the reading program, when the doctor said Jake's broken arm didn't need an X-ray, when her mother's nursing home wanted to move her to a smaller room. This was one of those moments. He made the call. Getting them inside took both of them. Tom lifted the dog German Shepherd, male, maybe 4 years old, maybe 70 pounds when healthy. He weighed less than 40 now, light as kindling, light as a child. "Lord, have mercy," Tom breathed. His back protested. His heart, the heart that had betrayed him 18 months ago, that had ended his career and stolen his purpose, pounded against his ribs. He ignored both. Sarah gathered the puppies. They fit in her 2 cupped hands, all 3 of them. Their cries were thin, reedy things, barely there, the sound of creatures too weak to demand, only to hope. They made a nest by the fireplace, old quilts from the linen closet, hot water bottles wrapped in dish towels. Sarah tucked the puppies against the dog's belly instinct. Or maybe something deeper, warmth, safety. The only comfort she could offer. The dog's eye opened at the movement, tracked the puppies, made sure they were there, still breathing. Then he let himself go. His body relaxed, his breathing slowed. Not death, not yet, but surrender. He'd done what he came to do, found help, found warmth, found a door that opened instead of staying shut. Whatever came next was out of his paws now. Tom stood by the fireplace, watching. His hands hung at his sides, useless. He'd spent his whole career knowing exactly what to do in emergencies, how to triage, how to prioritize, how to keep his head when everything was falling apart. Now he just stood there. The fire popped and crackled, sending sparks up the chimney, the old familiar sound of this house, this hearth, this life they'd built together. "The vet's on her way," he said finally. 20 minutes. Sarah didn't look up. She was stroking the dog's head, murmuring something Tom couldn't hear. The puppy squirmed against the dog's belly, seeking warmth. "What happened to him?" Tom asked. Sarah's hand paused. Her fingers traced the ring of scarring around the dog's neck, the old wounds on his shoulders, the way his ribs stood out like the bars of a cage. "Someone happened to him," she said quietly. "Someone who should have loved him." Tom looked at the dog, at his wife, at the 3 tiny lives pressed against a body that had nothing left to give. "We should probably call animal control," he said. "When Dr. Hayes is done, they'll know what to do with—" "No." Sarah's voice was soft, absolute. "Sarah?" "I said no." Tom ran his hand through his hair, the gesture he always made when he was frustrated, when something didn't make sense, when the world refused to follow the rules. "We can't take care of 4 dogs. We don't have the space. We don't have the money. We're not equipped for—" Neither was he. Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes met Tom's. He wasn't equipped either. Starving. Freezing. Beaten half to death. And he still found 3 puppies who needed help. Still carried them, Lord knows how far. Still kept them alive through the worst night of the year. She turned back to the dog. "If he can do that, we can buy some puppy formula." Tom opened his mouth, closed it, outside. The first gray light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. The thermometer on the porch rail read 16 degrees. The wind came off the fields carrying the smell of frozen earth and distant snow. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine turned over. Dr. Hayes. Probably. On her way. Tom looked at the dog, at his wife, at the empty house that had felt like a tomb for 3 months. "Fine," he said finally. "But if this goes wrong, it won't." She sounded certain. She wasn't. Neither was he. A friend once told me that home isn't where you're born. It's where someone leaves the light on for you. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear where you're watching from today. Drop a comment and let's see how far this little family's journey has reached. Dr. Eleanor Hayes arrived at 6:43 a.m., her old Subaru crunching up the gravel driveway with headlights cutting through the gray dawn. Sarah watched from the window. The vet moved slowly, 62 years old. Silver hair pulled back in a practical knot, medical bag in one hand. She'd been the only vet in Cedar Falls for 37 years. Delivered calves in blizzards. Stitched up hunting dogs at midnight. Put down beloved pets while their owners wept into her shoulder. She walked like someone who'd seen too much but kept showing up anyway. Tom opened the door before she knocked. "Living room," he said. "By the fire." Dr. Hayes didn't waste words. She knelt beside the dog, her knees cracking against the hardwood. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, lifting lips to examine gums, pressing gently along the rib cage. The smell of wet fur and old blood filled the warm room. The fire popped. The dog didn't react, didn't flinch, too exhausted for fear. Sarah stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. The puppies were still pressed against the dog's belly, their tiny mouths working even in sleep, searching for milk that wasn't there. "I need a name," Dr. Hayes said without looking up. "For my records." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Max." Dr. Hayes wrote it on her chart. Her pen moved steadily, but Sarah noticed the way her jaw tightened, the way her breathing changed. "How bad?" Tom asked. Dr. Hayes sat back on her heels, removed her glasses, cleaned them on her flannel shirt, an old habit, something to do with her hands while she gathered her thoughts. 25 pounds underweight, maybe 30. Her voice was flat, professional, the voice of someone delivering hard news. 3 rib fractures. Healed wrong. Someone hit him, more than once, hard enough to break bone. Sarah's stomach turned. The coffee she'd drunk earlier rose in her throat. The scarring around his neck rope burns, tied short for a long time. Months. Probably. The paw pads. Dr. Hayes paused, took a breath. He walked at least 15 miles on those, maybe 20, in this cold. Tom's hands curled into fists at his sides. His knuckles went white. "The puppies aren't his," Dr. Hayes continued. "Wrong age. They're maybe 2.5 weeks old. Someone else's litter. Then how? He found them, somewhere on his way here, and he carried them." The words hung in the air. The fire crackled. One of the puppies whimpered in its sleep. Dr. Hayes stood slowly. Her face had changed something hard behind her eyes now. Something cold. "Whoever owned this dog," she said quietly, "is still out there." Dr. Hayes left instructions I-Fi. Fluids for the first 24 hours. Warming protocol. High-calorie food every 2 hours for Max. Puppy formula every 2 hours for the little one since Max couldn't nurse them. "They're going to need round-the-clock care," she said at the door, pulling on her gloves. "Both shifts, day and night. You folks up for that?" Sarah nodded before Tom could answer. Dr. Hayes looked at her for a long moment, then at Tom, then back at the living room, where Max lay motionless by the fire, the 3 puppies tucked against his side. "I've been doing this longer than you 2 have been married," she said quietly. "I've seen dogs come back from worse, not many, but some." She paused. "He's got fight left in him, I can see it. Question is whether you've got enough fight to match." She drove away. Her taillights disappeared down the gravel road, swallowed by the gray morning. Tom closed the door. The house settled into silence. Sarah was already in the kitchen, filling a pot with water, pulling bottles and nipples from the emergency supplies Dr. Hayes had left. Her hands moved with purpose, the same hands that had soothed hundreds of crying children over 28 years of teaching, that had held Jake when he was small, that had gripped Tom's fingers during the long nights after his heart attack. "We need a system," she said without turning around. "You take the 6 a.m. to noon shift. I'll take midnight to 6 a.m. We overlap in the afternoons. Sarah, the formula needs to be exactly 101 degrees. Too hot burns their mouths. Too cold and they won't take it. Sarah." She stopped, her hands stilled on the counter. Tom crossed the kitchen, stood behind her, close enough to smell the coffee still on her breath, the faint lavender of her shampoo. "Are you sure about this?" She didn't turn around. "No," she said. "I'm not sure about anything. I haven't been sure about anything since Jake left." Her voice cracked. "But I know that dog didn't walk 15 miles through a blizzard just to die on our kitchen floor. And I know those puppies didn't survive the worst night of the year just to end up in some shelter." Her shoulders trembled. "And I know this house has been too quiet for too long. And I know—" She stopped, swallowed. "I know I need something to take care of. Tom, something that needs me, because right now, I don't know what I'm for anymore." Tom put his hands on her shoulders, felt the tension there, the exhaustion, the desperate hope she was trying so hard to hide. "Okay," he said. "Okay." She turned. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying, not quite. "You mean it?" "I mean it." She hugged him, tight, the way she used to when they were young, when every embrace meant something. Tom held her, breathed in the scent of her hair, let himself feel, for the first time in months, like they were in this together. The moment broke when one of the puppies cried out a thin, reedy sound from the living room. Sarah pulled back, wiped her eyes. "First feeding," she said. "You want to learn—" Tom followed her to the living room. Max's eye opened as they approached, tracked them, watched. "It's okay, boy," Sarah murmured. "We're just going to feed your babies." She knelt beside the nest, lifted the smallest puppy, a black female, barely bigger than Tom's fist. The creature squirmed weakly, mouth opening and closing. "Support the head," Sarah said, showing Tom. "Hold the bottle at an angle so they don't get air, and watch their belly when it rounds out like a little drum. They're full." Tom took the puppy, held it against his chest. It was warm. So warm. Despite everything. A small furnace of life beating against his palm. The puppy latched onto the bottle, began to suck. Tom watched. Something shifted in his chest. Something he thought was dead. "She's strong," he said. "They all are." Sarah was feeding another puppy, a black and tan female, slightly larger. They shouldn't be alive. None of them should be alive. But here they are. Max watched them feed his charges. His tail moved barely. Just a twitch, but it moved. "He knows," Sarah said softly. "He knows we're helping." Tom looked at the dog, at those patient, watchful eyes. "Yeah," he said. "I reckon he does." They fed the puppies together. The fire crackled, the old house creaked and settled around them. Outside, the sun rose higher, turning the snow pink and gold. When the puppies were full, Sarah settled them back against Max's side. The dog sniffed each one carefully, counted them. 1, 2, 3. All present, all safe. Then he looked at Tom. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Tom couldn't have named it. Understanding. Maybe recognition. One tired old creature acknowledging another. "You're safe now," Tom said quietly. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." Max's eye closed. His breathing deepened. He slept. The next 3 days blurred together, feedings every 2 hours, day and night. Tom and Sarah worked in shifts, passing each other in the hallway like ships, exchanging brief reports. Max ate half a cup of the soft food. "The little black one, I've been calling her Grace, she's the weakest. Watch her." He stood up this morning. Just for a second, but he stood. Small bulletins, vital signs, the language of people fighting a war together. Tom hadn't talked this much to his wife in months, maybe years. Not about important things. Anyway, not about anything that mattered. Now they talked about formula temperatures and paw pad healing, and whether Max's breathing sounded better or worse than yesterday. Small things, real things. On the second day, Sarah named the puppies. The black one's Grace, the black and tan is Hope, the lighter one's Faith. Tom raised an eyebrow. You're naming them? Of course I'm naming them. Seems like we're getting attached. Sarah looked at him. We were attached the minute I opened that door. She was right. He knew she was right. On the third day, Max ate solid food for the first time. Just a few bites of the high-calorie paste Dr. Hayes had left, lapped slowly from Sarah's fingers. But he ate. His eyes looked clearer, his breathing steadier. He's turning the corner, Dr. Hayes said when she came for her follow-up visit. I didn't think he would, but he is. She shook her head. Tough old boy. How old is he, do you think? Tom asked. 4, maybe 5. Hard to tell with the malnutrition. He should be in his prime. Should weigh 70. 75 pounds. She looked at Max, her jaw tight. Whatever they did to him, they did it for years. This wasn't a few months of neglect. This was systematic. The word hung in the air, systematic. Someone had hurt this dog on purpose, deliberately, over and over again. Tom felt something cold settle in his stomach. Will he recover? Sarah asked. Fully, physically, probably, with time and care and a lot of groceries. Dr. Hayes paused. Mentally, that's harder to say. Dogs like this, dogs who've been through what he's been through, they carry it with them. He might always flinch at certain things, might never fully trust. She looked at Sarah. But he trusted you, that first morning, when he was dying on your porch. He trusted you enough to let you touch him. That's not nothing. After Dr. Hayes left, Tom sat by the fire with Max. The dog was awake, watching the puppies sleep. His head rested on his paws. His breathing was slow, even. Tom reached out, put his hand on Max's head. The dog didn't flinch, didn't tense, just leaned into the touch. Barely. Just a little. What happened to you, boy? Tom murmured. Who did this? Max's eye met his. No answer there. Just patience. Just waiting. Somewhere out there. The person who had done this was walking around free, living their life, maybe hurting other animals, or maybe hurting people. The thought made Tom's hands curl into fists. We're going to find out, he said quietly. Whoever you're running from, we're going to find out. Max's tail twitched. Once, whether he understood or not, Tom couldn't say, but it felt like a promise. Day 4, February 1st. Tom woke before dawn. The house was cold. The fire had burned down during the night, and the February wind was finding every crack in the old walls. He went downstairs to rebuild the fire, expecting to find Max asleep. The puppies nestled against him. Instead, he found his wife. Sarah was on the floor beside the fireplace. One of Jake's old baby blankets wrapped around her shoulders. She was asleep, her head pillowed on a couch cushion. One hand rested on Max's back, the other cradled Grace against her chest. The puppy's eyes were closed. Her tiny body rose and fell with steady breathing. Max was awake. His head lifted when Tom entered. His eyes tracked Tom across the room. But he didn't move. Didn't disturb Sarah. He was watching over both of them. Tom stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at his wife, at the dog, at the 3 small lives they'd somehow become responsible for. Something cracked in his chest. Not his heart, not the physical one. Anyway, something else. Something that had been frozen for 18 months. He got a blanket from the hall closet, laid it gently over Sarah. She stirred, but didn't wake. "Thank you," Tom whispered. Whether to Sarah or to Max, he wasn't sure. He rebuilt the fire. The flames caught, crackling and popping, throwing warm light across the room. Then he sat down in his chair and watched the sunrise through the window. The fields were white with snow. The sky turned pink, then orange, then pale winter blue. The old oak tree in the backyard cast long shadows across the yard, the same tree Tom's father had planted the year Tom was born. 58 years ago. A lifetime. And now here he was, retired, useless, his heart giving out, his son gone, his purpose vanished. Or so he'd thought. Max made a sound, a soft whine. Tom looked over. The dog was trying to stand. His legs shook. His whole body trembled with the effort. But he was trying. Tom moved to help, but Max shook him off. This was something he needed to do himself. One leg under, then another. A pause, a tremor, then the back legs, scrabbling for purchase on the hardwood floor. And then he was standing, shaking, barely, but standing. Max looked at Tom. Those eyes, clearer now, brighter, held something that might have been pride. "Well, I'll be—" Tom breathed. Max took a step. His leg buckled. He caught himself. Another step, and another. He crossed the room slowly, painfully to where the puppies lay in their nest, sniffed each one. 1, 2, 3, present and accounted for. Then he turned and walked to Tom. His legs gave out when he reached the chair. He collapsed against Tom's legs, not falling, but arriving, like this was where he'd been trying to get all along. Tom's hand found Max's head. The fur was softer now, cleaner. Sarah had spent an hour yesterday with warm water and a gentle brush, working out the worst of the mats. Beneath his palm, Tom felt the ridge of scar tissue, the places where bone had healed wrong, the map of everything this animal had survived. Max's tail moved. Once, slowly. "Yeah," Tom said. His voice came out rough, thick. "I know, boy, I know." He didn't know what he was agreeing to. He didn't move for a long time. Word spread. In a town like Cedar Falls, it always did. The vet told someone, that someone told someone else. By the end of the first week, half the county knew about the dog who'd walked through a blizzard carrying 3 orphaned puppies. February 3rd, the first casserole appeared on the porch. No note, just a Pyrex dish covered in foil, still warm, chicken and rice. From the smell of it, Sarah brought it inside, her eyes wet. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, "from the church. I recognize the dish." The next day, a bag of puppy formula appeared, then dog food, then an envelope with 4 $20 bills and a handwritten note. "For the vet bills, God bless." Tom stood on the porch, looking at the growing pile of donations, and felt something loosen in his chest. They weren't alone. They'd thought they were after Jake left, after Tom's retirement, after the long gray months of silence and distance. They'd thought they'd become invisible. But they weren't. The town was watching. The town was helping. February 4th, Frank Novak came by. Tom heard the truck before he saw it, Frank's old Ford, engine knocking the way it had for 20 years. Frank himself appeared at the door a minute later, holding a heating pad wrapped in a towel. "Barbara's," he said gruffly. "She had bad joints at the end. Don't need it anymore." He thrust it toward Tom before Tom could respond. Frank was 71 years old, Korean War veteran, ran the auto repair shop on Main Street for 43 years. His wife Barbara had died 2 years ago cancer, quick and brutal. Since then, Frank had become a ghost, shuffling between his empty house and his empty shop, speaking to no one. Now he stood on Tom's porch, holding his dead wife's heating pad, his eyes fixed somewhere past Tom's shoulder. "Heard about your dog," Frank said. "Heard he walked through that blizzard. Carried puppies?" "That's right." Frank nodded. His jaw worked. "Barbara would have taken in 100 strays if I'd let her. Always said I was too practical, too worried about the mess." He paused. "Reckon she was right about that." He turned and walked back to his truck before Tom could thank him. Tom watched him go. The Ford coughed and rattled down the driveway, taillights disappearing around the bend. He looked down at the heating pad in his hands. Barbara Novak's heating pad, the one she'd used in her final months, when the pain got too bad to bear. Tom's throat tightened. Some gifts were bigger than they appeared. February 5th. The puppies opened their eyes. Hope went first, the boldest of the three, always the first to cry for food, the first to squirm toward warmth. Tom was doing the 6 a.m. feeding, still half asleep, when he noticed her head turning, her eyelids twitching. Then they opened, 2 dark eyes, bright as wet stones, focused on his face. The first thing this creature had ever seen was him. Tom's breath caught, Hope's tail twitched, once, twice, a tiny vibration against his palm. She was looking at him like he was the whole world, because, right now, he was... "Sarah," Tom called, his voice strange to his own ears. "Sarah, come here." She came, saw what he saw. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Tom." They sat together on the floor, watching the puppies discover sight. Faith opened her eyes an hour later. Grace, the smallest, the weakest, waited until afternoon, like she wanted to make sure it was safe first. By evening, all three were looking around the room with the wide-eyed wonder of creatures who had just discovered that the world was bigger than they'd imagined. Max watched them. His tail wagged slow, steady every time one of them looked his way. "He's proud," Sarah said softly. "Look at him. He's proud of them." Tom looked at Max, at the puppies, at his wife. Her face lit with something he hadn't seen in months. Joy. That's what it was. Plain, simple joy. "Yeah," Tom said. "Reckon he's got reason to be." That night, after the puppies were asleep and Max had settled into his spot by the fire, Tom went out to the porch. The air was cold, February cold. The kind that bit at your lungs, but the sky was clear. Stars everywhere, scattered like salt on black cloth. He stood there for a long time, looking at nothing, thinking about everything. 3 weeks ago, he'd been ready to sell this house, ready to give up, ready to spend whatever years he had left just waiting for the end. Now he had something to wake up for. The door opened behind him. Sarah stepped out, wrapped in her bathrobe, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "Figured you could use this." She handed him a cup, stood beside him. They watched the stars together. The coffee steamed in the cold air. "Tom? Yeah. I'm glad you didn't argue too hard. That first morning..." Tom sipped his coffee. Let the warmth spread through him. "I've been married to you for 40 years. Sarah Miller. I know a lost cause when I see one." She laughed. The sound was rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a while, but it was there. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood together until the cold drove them inside. February 6th, day 10. Dr. Hayes came for her weekly checkup, examined Max thoroughly, front to back, checked the puppy's weight, their eyes, their reflexes. "He's gaining," she said finally. 8 pounds since he arrived. Coat's already looking better. She ran her hand along Max's flank. "Another month. You won't recognize him." "And the puppies?" Sarah asked. "Growing like weeds, healthy as horses." Dr. Hayes smiled, a rare sight. "You two have done good work." After she left, Tom sat with Max by the fire. The dog was different now, still thin, still scarred, but there was light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Energy. Something that looked almost like hope. "You know what I think," Tom said. "I think you knew exactly what you were doing. That night you showed up here. I think you chose us." Max's ear twitched. "I don't know how, don't know why, but out of all the doors you could have stopped at, you stopped at ours." Tom shook his head. "And now look at us. Couple of old folks with something to live for again." Max's tail wagged. "Darn good choice, if you ask me." The fire crackled. The house settled. And then a sound. Outside. Max's head came up. His ears swiveled toward the window. A low growl built in his throat. Tom turned. Through the window, he could see the road, the bare trees, the white fields stretching to the horizon, and a truck, a dark blue pickup, parked at the end of the driveway, sitting there, watching. Tom's blood went cold. "Sarah," he called, keeping his voice calm. "Come here." She came. He pointed. They watched together as the truck sat there for 5 minutes. 10, then, slowly, it backed up, turned around, and drove away. Max's growl faded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the window, on the place where the truck had been. Tom looked at the dog, at the scars on his neck, at the fear that had crept back into those patient eyes. "You know that truck?" Tom said quietly. "Don't you, boy?" Max didn't answer, but his trembling told Tom everything he needed to know. Tom wrote down the license plate number that night. Iowa plates, Dunmore County, 3 counties east. He didn't tell Sarah what he was doing, just slipped the paper into his wallet and tried to sleep. Sleep didn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that truck, sitting at the end of his driveway, watching. Max didn't sleep either. Tom could hear him pacing downstairs, his nails clicking against the hardwood, back and forth, back and forth. The sound of an animal who remembered what fear felt like. At 2 a.m., Tom gave up, went downstairs. Max was by the window, his nose pressed against the glass, his breath fogged the pain. His body was tense, every muscle rigid. "He's not coming back tonight," Tom said quietly. "Whoever he is." Max didn't move, didn't look away from the window. Tom sat in his chair, watched the dog watch the darkness. "You know what I did for 32 years, Tom said. "I ran into burning buildings, pulled people out of wrecks, held strangers' hands while they died." He paused. "I thought I knew what evil looked like, thought I'd seen the worst of it." Max's ear twitched, listening. "But fire isn't evil. Fire just is. It doesn't hate, doesn't choose." Tom's hands curled into fists. "What someone did to you that was a choice. Every day. For years. Someone chose to hurt you. That's different. That's worse." Max turned from the window, crossed the room slowly, lay down at Tom's feet. His head rested on Tom's shoe. His eye looked up at Tom's face. "I don't know who he is," Tom said. "But if he comes back, He's going to have to go through me. Max's tail twitched. Once. They sat together until dawn, February 7th. The phone rang at 8 a.m. Tom was in the kitchen, making coffee. The old percolator on the stove, the one his mother had used. The one Sarah always threatened to replace but never did, gurgled and hissed its familiar song. He picked up the receiver. "Tom, it's Ray Cooper." Sheriff Ray Cooper. 23 years on the job. Tom had known him since he was a rookie deputy with a bad mustache and worse driving skills. "Ray, what can I do for you? Got a minute, need to talk to you about something." Tom's stomach tightened. "This about that truck I saw." A pause. "You saw it too." "End of my driveway, Sauper, day before yesterday. Sat there for 10 minutes, then drove off." "Dunmore County plates." "That's right." Another pause. Longer this time. "Tom, I think you better come down to the station. There's some things you need to know." The Cedar Falls Sheriff's Office was a squat brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between the hardware store and the old movie theater that had closed in '87. Tom had been inside 100 times over the years, dropping off accident reports, giving statements, picking up donated toys for the fire department's Christmas drive. It had never felt like this. Ray Cooper sat behind his desk, a manila folder open in front of him. His face was grave. "Close the door," he said. Tom closed it. "Sit down." Tom sat. Ray pushed the folder across the desk. "This came in yesterday. Missing animal report from Dunmore County. Filed 3 days ago." Tom opened the folder. Read, "Missing animal report owner, Wade Brennan. 42 Rural, Route 7. Dunmore County, animal, male, German Shepherd. Approximately 4 years old. Description: brown and black markings. Scarring on neck and shoulders. Notes: animal is aggressive, dangerous. Escaped property 1/26. Do not approach. Contact owner immediately if located." Tom read it again. The words didn't change. "Dangerous," he said flatly. "That dog hasn't growled once since he got to us. Not once." "I know." Ray leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked. "I did some digging after I got this. Made some calls to folks I know in Dunmore." He pulled out another piece of paper, a printout, official looking. Wade Brennan, 42 years old, owns about 60 acres out past the county line. Keeps to himself mostly. Neighbors don't like him much. Why not? Ray's jaw tightened. Animal cruelty charges. Twice. 2019 and 2021. Pled down both times. First offense got community service. Second, got a fine and probation. He paused. Neighbors filed complaints about dogs crying at night. Deputies went out a few times. But Brennan always had his story straight. Dogs were fine when they looked, or he'd say he'd already gotten rid of the animal in question. Tom stared at the printout. His vision narrowed to a point. So he's been hurting animals for years. Looks that way. And nobody stopped him. Ray's silence was answer enough. Tom closed the folder, set it on the desk. What happens now? Legally, Ray spread his hands. He owns the dog, has papers, registration, the whole 9 yards. If he files to get him back, he can have him. The law says yes. Tom stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. The law is wrong. I know. Ray stood too. Came around the desk, put his hand on Tom's shoulder. Look, I'm not telling you this as sheriff. I'm telling you as a friend. Brennan knows his dog is missing. He's looking. That truck you saw, that was probably him, or someone working for him. So, what do I do? Ray's grip tightened. You do what you've always done. Tom, you protect people who can't protect themselves. He paused. I never saw this report. I never had this conversation. You understand. Tom understood. Thanks, Ray. Don't thank me yet. If Brennan finds out where his dog is, this is going to get ugly. Tom walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the knob. Ray? Yeah. That report says Max is dangerous, aggressive. Tom turned. I've had him in my house for 2 weeks. He's never shown an ounce of aggression. Not to me, not to Sarah, not to the puppies he carried 15 miles through a blizzard. He met Ray's eyes. Why do you think Brennan would lie about that? Ray's face went hard. Because if the dog's dangerous, nobody asks questions if something happens to it. He paused. And because some men would rather destroy something than let it go free. Tom drove home slowly. The roads were clear now, the worst of the winter weather had passed, leaving behind gray slush and bare branches. The fields stretched out on either side, brown and empty, waiting for spring. He passed the diner where he'd eaten breakfast every Saturday for 30 years. The gas station where he'd filled up his truck since before Jake was born. The church where he and Sarah had gotten married. Where they'd baptized their son. Where they'd buried both their parents. This was his town. His home. The place where he knew every face, every name, every story. And somewhere out there, 3 counties east, a man named Wade Brennan was looking for his dog. Tom gripped the steering wheel tighter. He thought about what Ray had said, about the law, about ownership and property rights and all the reasons Brennan might be able to take Max back. He thought about Max, about the scars on his neck, about the ribs that had healed wrong because someone had broken them, about the way he'd flinched when Tom reached for the fireplace poker, how he still wouldn't eat from a bowl on the floor. He thought about the puppies, Hope and Faith and Grace, 3 lives that shouldn't exist, saved by an animal who had nothing left to give. And he thought about Sarah, about the light in her eyes these past 2 weeks, about the way she laughed now, really laughed, for the first time since Jake had left. The house came into view, white siding, green shutters, the porch where it had all begun. Sarah was outside, bundled in her winter coat, scattering birdseed on the frozen ground. She looked up when she heard the truck, waved. Tom pulled into the driveway, cut the engine. He sat there for a moment, watching his wife, watching the birds gather around her feet, watching the smoke curl from the chimney into the gray sky. This was what Brennan wanted to take from them. Not just Max, everything. Tom got out of the truck. "How'd it go?" Sarah asked. Tom looked at her, at this woman he'd loved for 40 years, at the hope in her eyes, the trust. He could lie, could tell her it was nothing, could spare her the fear, the worry, the fight that was coming, but they'd never lied to each other, not in 40 years. "We need to talk," he said. Her smile faded. "Inside." Tom said, "The puppies need feeding anyway." They went inside together. Max was waiting by the door. His tail wagged when he saw them, a real wag now, not the hesitant twitch of those first days. He pressed against Tom's legs, then Sarah's, then back to Tom. The puppies were awake in their nest, squirming and crying, feeding time, but that could wait. Tom sat Sarah down at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten 10,000 meals, where they'd helped Jake with his homework, where they'd made every important decision of their married life. "His name is Wade Brennan," Tom said. "He's from Dunmore County, and he wants Max back." Sarah's face went white. Tom told her everything. The argument lasted 2 hours. Not a fight they didn't fight. Not really. More like 2 people trying to find solid ground in an earthquake, grasping for handholds that kept crumbling away. "We could call a lawyer," Sarah said, "find out our options. And pay with what? We're on a fixed income. Sarah, A real legal fight could cost tens of thousands. Then we fundraise. The community's already helping. For puppy formula and vet bills, not for a court battle against a man who's got nothing better to do than make our lives miserable. So, what do you suggest? Just give up, hand him over. Tom slammed his palm on the table. The coffee cups rattled. I didn't say that. Silence. Sarah's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, pressing them against her stomach. I can't lose him. Tom, I know that sounds crazy. I know we've only had him 2 weeks, but I can't. I won't. I know. He came to us. Out of all the houses in this county, all the doors he could have stopped at, he came to us. That means something. I know. Sarah looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Then what do we do? Tom took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. We don't do anything. Not yet. Ray said Brennan hasn't filed anything official. He's just looking. For all we know, he'll give up. Move on. You don't believe that. Tom didn't answer. Because she was right? He didn't believe it. Men like Brennan didn't give up. They didn't move on. They held on to things until those things broke. And then they found something else to hold on to. We take it one day at a time, Tom said finally. We keep our heads down. We don't talk about Max to anyone who doesn't need to know. And if Brennan comes around again... What? What do we do then? Tom thought about the shotgun in the closet. The one his father had given him. The one he'd never used for anything but scaring crows out of the cornfield. We figure it out, he said. It wasn't a plan. It was barely a hope. But it was all they had. That night, Tom installed new deadbolts on every door in the house. He worked quietly, methodically, the way he'd done everything in his life. Measured twice, cut once, his father's voice in his head, steady and sure. Sarah watched from the hallway, arms crossed over her chest. Think that'll stop him? No, Tom tightened a screw. But it might slow him down. When he finished, he checked every window, every lock, every potential entry point. The house was old, built in '62 when people didn't worry so much about security. The windows were single pane, easy to break. The back door had a gap at the bottom where a determined man could slide a pry bar, but it was the best he could do. He found Sarah in the living room, sitting by the fire. Max was beside her, his head in her lap. The puppies were asleep in their nest. Remember when we brought Jake home from the hospital? Sarah said without looking up. Tom sat down across from her. I remember. I was so scared. Terrified. Really. This tiny little person, completely dependent on us, and I had no idea what I was doing. She stroked Max's head. But you said something. Do you remember what you said? Tom thought back. 20 years, a lifetime ago. I said we'd figure it out together. You said we'd figure it out together. Sarah smiled. Same thing you said tonight. It worked out okay with Jake. It did. Sarah's smile faded. But Jake didn't have a Wade Brennan trying to take him away. Max lifted his head. His ears swiveled toward the window. Tom tensed. But there was nothing. Just the wind. Just the night. Max settled back down. His eye found Tom's face. He knows, Sarah said softly. He can tell something's wrong. Dogs always know. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. The old house creaked and groaned. Tom, yeah, what if we can't protect him? The question hung in the air. Tom looked at Max, at the scars, at the trust in those patient eyes. Then we die trying, he said. He meant it. The next 2 days passed without incident. No truck, no strangers, no phone calls from Ray Cooper with more bad news. Tom started to hope. Maybe Brennan had given up. Maybe he'd moved on to something else. Maybe February 9th. 3:47 p.m. Tom was in the garage, organizing his tools for the fourth time. His hands needed something to do while his mind chewed on the problem. The sound of an engine made him look up, through the garage window. He saw a pickup truck pull into the driveway. Dark blue. Iowa plates. Dunmore County. Tom's blood went cold. He set down his wrench, walked to the garage door, opened it. The truck sat there, engine idling. A man behind the wheel, watching. Tom walked toward it. His heart pounded, the bad heart. The one that had ended his career, but he ignored it. The driver's window rolled down. "Afternoon." The man's voice was friendly, casual. "You Tom Miller?" Tom stopped 10 feet from the truck. "Depends on who's asking." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Wade Brennan. I believe you've got something that belongs to me." Tom didn't move. The wind cut across the driveway, carrying the smell of Brennan's truck engine grease, cigarette smoke, something sour underneath. The man himself sat behind the wheel, one arm resting on the window frame, Carhartt jacket, John Deere cap, a face that might have been handsome once, before something hard set into the lines around his mouth. "Don't believe I do," Tom said. Brennan's smile didn't waver. Big German shepherd, male, scars around the neck. He tilted his head. "Ring any bells?" Inside the house, Max started barking. Sharp, urgent sounds. Not the bark of a dog defending territory, the bark of a dog who recognized a voice, who remembered what that voice meant. Tom's hands hung at his sides. Steady. He willed them to stay steady. "Lot of German shepherds in Iowa. This one's mine. Got the papers to prove it." Brennan reached across the passenger seat, pulled out a folder, held it up. "Registration, vet records, microchip documentation, legal and proper." And Tom didn't look at the folder. "That dog walked 20 miles through a blizzard to get away from you. Seems to me he made his choice." Something flickered behind Brennan's eyes. The smile stayed, but the temperature dropped. "Dogs don't make choices. Dogs are property." He set the folder on the dashboard. "Now, I understand you folks got attached. That happens, but I'm willing to be reasonable about this. You hand over my property, nice and quiet, and we forget this whole thing ever happened. And if I don't..." Brennan's hand moved to the gear shift. His knuckles were scarred, old scars, the kind that came from hitting things, or people. "Then I come back with a sheriff and a court order, and then I sue you for theft, harboring stolen goods, and whatever else my lawyer can think up." His eyes moved past Tom to the house, to the windows. "Nice place you got here. Lot of land, lot of equity. Be ashamed to lose it over a dog." Tom's fists clenched. His knuckles ached with the pressure. 32 years he'd spent running into danger, pulling people from wrecks, carrying children from burning buildings. He'd faced down flames that could kill him in seconds, smoke that could blind him in a breath. But this was different. Fire wasn't evil. Fire just was. This man had made choices. Every scar on Max's body was a choice. "Get off my property," Tom said. Brennan laughed. A short, ugly sound. "That's your answer, really?" He shook his head. "Old-timer. I came here nice, polite, giving you a chance to do the right thing. But if you want to make this hard..." I said, "Get off my property." Brennan held Tom's gaze for a long moment. 5 seconds. 10. Then he put the truck in reverse. "Have it your way," he said. "But I'll be back, and next time, I won't be so friendly." The truck backed down the driveway, turned onto the road, disappeared around the curve. Tom stood there until his legs started shaking. Then he went inside. Sarah was waiting in the kitchen. Her face was pale. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter. "I heard," she said. "I was at the window." Max was beside her, pressed against her legs. His body trembled. His eyes tracked Tom as he entered, then flicked to the door, then back to Tom. "He's scared," Sarah said. "Look at him. He's terrified." Tom looked. The dog who had walked through a blizzard, who had carried 3 puppies to safety, who had survived years of abuse and still found the strength to trust again. That dog was cowering in the kitchen, shaking like a leaf. "He knows," Tom said quietly. "He knows Brennan was here." "What are we going to do?" Tom crossed to the window, looked out at the empty driveway, the road beyond, the fields stretching to the horizon. "We fight," he said. The next morning, Tom drove to Des Moines, 3 hours each way, a lawyer's office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a nail salon. Not what he'd expected, but the woman came recommended Janet Walsh from Animal Control had given him the name. Patricia Cowell, animal law specialist. She was younger than Tom expected, maybe 40. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a desk covered with files, photographs of dogs and cats and horses on the walls. "Tell me everything," she said. Tom told her. The blizzard, the porch, the puppies, Max's condition when they found him, Dr. Hayes' examination, the broken ribs, the rope burns, the paw pads worn to raw flesh, and Brennan, the truck, the threats, the folder full of papers. Patricia listened without interrupting, made notes on a yellow legal pad. When Tom finished, she set down her pen. "Here's the situation," she said. "Legally, animals are property. Brennan has documentation proving ownership. If he files to get Max back, he's got a strong case, even with the abuse. Proving abuse is hard without a criminal conviction. Dr. Hayes' records help they establish that Max was mistreated, but they don't prove Brennan did it. His lawyer will argue the injuries happened before Brennan owned him, or after he escaped." Tom's jaw tightened. "So, what can we do?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "A few things. First, we document everything. Dr. Hayes' records, photographs, witness statements, build a paper trail that shows the pattern of abuse. Second, we look into Brennan's history, prior complaints, animal control reports, anything that establishes he's done this before. Ray Cooper said there were complaints, 2 convictions, pled down. That helps. Prior bad acts can be used to show pattern of behavior." She paused. "Third, we prepare for a fight. If Brennan files, we counterfile. Argue that returning Max would endanger his welfare. Some judges will consider the animal's best interest, especially if we can show ongoing danger. And if the judge doesn't consider it," Patricia's face was honest, direct, "then we might lose." Tom sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. "How much is this going to cost?" "Depends on how far it goes. If Brennan backs down, maybe a few thousand. If it goes to trial," she shrugged, "could be 20, 30,000, maybe more. $20,000? 30. Tom thought about his pension, Sarah's savings, the house that had been paid off for 15 years. "We'll find the money," he said. Patricia nodded. "I'll need a retainer to get started. 5,000. I'll have it to you by the end of the week." They shook hands. Tom drove home. The fields rolled past, brown, empty. Waiting for spring, $30,000. It might as well have been $1 million. he told Sarah that night. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd made every important decision of their married life. Supper dishes pushed aside, coffee growing cold. "We could mortgage the house," Tom said. Sarah's face didn't change. "The house your father built, the house you were born in, it's just a house. It's our home, Tom, and Max is our dog." They stared at each other across the table. "There has to be another way," Sarah said. "If there is, I don't see it." The refrigerator hummed. The radiator ticked, somewhere in the living room. One of the puppies whimpered in its sleep. "I talked to Pastor Mitchell today," Sarah said slowly. "After you left, told him what was happening." "What'd he say?" "He said the church might help. Take up a collection. Not enough to cover everything, but something." Tom shook his head. "I'm not taking charity." "It's not charity. Tom, it's community." Sarah's voice sharpened. "These people, Frank, Dr. Hayes, the folks who've been leaving food on our porch, they want to help. They care about what happens to Max. Why won't you let them out? Because this isn't their fight." "It became their fight the minute they dropped off that first casserole." Sarah reached across the table, took his hand. "We're not alone in this. You need to start believing that." Tom looked at their joined hands, his weathered and rough, hers smaller, softer, but just as strong. 40 years, 10,000 meals at this table. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll talk to Mitchell, see what we can do." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We're going to get through this." "You sound sure." "I'm not sure of anything." Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "But I have faith. In God, in our neighbors, and in that stubborn old man I married." Tom almost smiled. Almost. The next week was a blur. Pastor Mitchell announced the fundraiser at Sunday service. Tom and Sarah weren't there, couldn't bring themselves to face the pity. The questions, but they heard about it afterward. A special collection. Donations accepted at the church office. Every dollar goes to Max's legal defense. By Wednesday, they had $3,000. By Friday, $5,000. Frank Novak came by with an envelope, wouldn't say how much was inside, wouldn't let Tom thank him. "Barbara always said I was too tight with money," he said gruffly. "Time I proved her wrong about something." Dr. Hayes waived her remaining bills. Professional courtesy, she called it. Tom knew better, but he didn't argue. Letters arrived, some with checks, some with just words of encouragement. From Cedar Falls, from neighboring towns, from places Tom had never heard of. Word had spread. The dog who walked through a blizzard. The puppies he saved. The family who took them in. People cared. Tom hadn't expected that, hadn't dared to hope for it, but here it was. February 15th. The pushback began. It started small. A letter to the editor in the Cedar Falls Gazette. "While we all love dogs, we must remember that the law exists for a reason. Property rights matter. What precedent does it set when we decide emotional attachment trumps legal ownership?" Tom read it twice, felt his stomach turn. The next day, another letter, then another. "The Millers seem like nice folks, but they're breaking the law, plain and simple. If we start ignoring property rights whenever we feel like it, where does it end? I hear the owner has papers, registration, vet records. What more proof do people need?" Tom brought the paper to Sarah. She read it in silence. "Someone's organizing this," she said finally. "Brennan, maybe, or someone working for him." She set the paper down. "It doesn't matter. We knew this was coming." "I didn't think it would come from our own neighbors." Sarah looked at him. Her eyes were tired, older than they'd been a month ago. Not everyone's our neighbor, Tom. Some folks are just people who live nearby. February 16th. The pressure intensified. Tom drove to town for groceries. The usual route Main Street, past the hardware store, past the diner where he'd eaten breakfast every Saturday for 30 years. Gerald Patterson was sweeping the sidewalk in front of his store. Tom waved. Patterson looked away. Tom's hand fell. He parked at the grocery store, walked inside, got his cart, his list, his routine. The aisles felt different today. People moved out of his way without meeting his eyes. Conversations stopped when he passed, at the checkout. Margie Thompson, who'd known him since kindergarten, who'd sat behind him in church for 40 years, scanned his items without a word. "How are you, Margie?" "Fine." "And Bill? His back any better?" "It's fine." She handed him his receipt. Their fingers didn't touch. "Have a nice day," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. Tom loaded his groceries into the truck, sat behind the wheel for a long time. This was what Brennan wanted. Not just Max, not just money. He wanted to isolate them, cut them off, make them feel so alone that giving up seemed easier than fighting. Tom started the truck. It wasn't going to work. That night, Frank Novak stopped by again. He stood on the porch, hat in his hands, his face grim. "Lost 2 customers today," he said. "The Hendersons and old Mrs. Pike. Been going to my shop for 20 years. Both of them." Tom's stomach dropped. "Because of us." "Because they're scared," Frank shrugged. "Can't blame them, I suppose. Brennan's got people whispering, saying anyone who helps you might get dragged into the lawsuit." "Frank, I never wanted to, didn't say I was stopping." Frank's chin lifted. "Barbara and I didn't run from fights. Not in 43 years of marriage. I'm not starting now." He put his hat back on. "Just thought you should know what's happening out there. So you're not blindsided." He walked back to his truck. The engine coughed to life. The taillights disappeared down the driveway. Tom stood on the porch. The wind was cold. February cold. The kind that seeped into your bones and made you feel old. He thought about Gerald Patterson, about Margie Thompson, about all the faces he'd known his whole life. Turning away? Was it worth it? The question came unbidden, unwanted. Was one dog even Max? Even this brave, broken creature who'd walked through darkness to find them worth all of this? The door opened behind him. "Tom," Sarah's voice, "come inside. The puppies need feeding." Tom turned. Through the doorway, he could see the living room, the fire crackling, the puppies in their nest, and Max, standing in the hallway, watching him, waiting, those eyes, patient, trusting, full of something that looked like faith. Tom walked inside, closed the door behind him. "Yeah," he said to no one in particular. "It's worth it." February 18th, day 22. The certified letter arrived at 10:47 a.m. Tom was in the garage hiding. Really, from the phone calls and the questions and the eyes that wouldn't meet his when Sarah came out with the envelope. Her hands were shaking. "It's from a lawyer," she said. "Brennan's lawyer." Tom took the envelope, opened it. Dunmore County District Court Case Number 2024-CV-0847. Plaintiff Wade Brennan, Defendants. Thomas Miller, Sarah Miller, R.E. Emergency motion for return of property. The language was legal, formal, bloodless, but the meaning was clear. Brennan had filed suit. He wanted Max back. He wanted $15,000 in damages. Hearing scheduled March 5th, 2 weeks away. Tom read it again. His vision blurred. "Tom," Sarah's voice was far away. "Tom, what does it say?" He handed her the letter, watched her face go white. Inside the house, Max started barking. Not the curious bark of these past weeks, not the happy bark of feeding time. The scared bark, the remembering bark. Tom looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Tom. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The fight had officially begun. Tom called Patricia Cowell that afternoon. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who'd delivered bad news before. "It's aggressive," she said. "Filing for emergency return of property, seeking damages. He's not trying to negotiate. He's trying to break you. Will it work? Depends on the judge. Margaret Sullivan, she's been on the bench for 22 years. Fair, but by the book. If Brennan's paperwork is solid, she might rule in his favor just to uphold precedent." Tom's grip tightened on the phone. "So, what do? We counterfile. Argue that returning Max to Brennan would constitute further abuse. We present Dr. Hayes's evidence, the prior complaints, everything we've got." Patricia paused. "And we pray the judge sees what we see." "How much time do we have?" 2 weeks. The hearing's March 5th. I'll need you both in Des Moines on the 3rd to prepare." Tom wrote it down. March 3rd, March 5th. 2 weeks to save Max's life. "I'll be there," he said. The next 14 days moved like molasses and lightning at the same time. Tom couldn't sleep. Would lie awake until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., listening to the house settle around him. Every creak was Brennan's footsteps. Every car on the distant highway was Brennan's truck. Max couldn't sleep either. Tom would find him pacing at night, his nails clicking against the hardwood. Back and forth, back and forth. They'd sit together in the dark living room, man and dog, watching the road. 2 weeks, Tom would tell him. Just 2 more weeks. Max's tail would twitch, whether he understood or not. Tom couldn't say, but it felt like a promise. February 20th. The town meeting. Pastor Mitchell had called it a community discussion, he'd announced, about the situation facing our neighbors. Everyone knew what that meant. The Methodist church basement smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs arranged in rows, a long table at the front with a microphone that squealed every time someone spoke too loudly. Tom and Sarah sat in the front row. They hadn't wanted to come, but Mitchell had insisted. "People need to see you," he'd said. "Need to know who they're fighting for." The room filled quickly. 70 people, maybe 80. Standing room only along the walls. Tom scanned the faces. Frank Novak near the back, arms crossed, Dr. Hayes by the window, a folder of medical records in her lap. The Hendersons, the ones who'd pulled their business from Frank's shop, huddled together near the door. And others, faces he didn't recognize. People who'd driven in from other towns, drawn by the story that had spread like wildfire through the county. Pastor Mitchell stood at the front, raised his hands for quiet. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time. There are strong feelings on both sides." He looked around the room. "I want to remind everyone that we're here to talk, not to fight. We're neighbors. We're going to stay neighbors. Let's keep that in mind." He sat down. The floor was open. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Gerald Patterson stood up. Tom's stomach tightened. "I'll say what everyone's thinking." Patterson's voice was tight, controlled. "This whole situation is a mess. The Millers took in a dog that belongs to someone else. Maybe Brennan's not a nice guy, I don't know him, but that doesn't change facts. The dog is his property," murmurs from part of the crowd. "I've got nothing against the Millers." Patterson continued. "Tom's a good man. Served this community for decades. But we can't just ignore the law because we feel sorry for a dog. Where does it end?" He sat down, More murmurs. Some nodding heads. A woman stood. Linda Marsh, elementary school secretary, Sarah's colleague for 15 years. "I hear what Gerald's saying." "I do," her voice trembled. "But I've seen those pictures. The ones Dr. Hayes took. That dog was tortured. Bones broken and healed wrong. Scars from being tied up so tight the rope cut into his flesh." Her voice broke. "If we send him back to that, knowing what we know, what does that say about us? What does that say about this town?" Applause from half the room, silence from the other half. Frank Novak stood slowly. The room went quiet. Everyone knew Frank. Everyone respected him. The war veteran, the widower, the man who'd served this community without complaint for 71 years. "I was at Chosin Reservoir in 1950, Frank said. His voice was rough but steady. 30 below zero, Chinese army had us surrounded. Men dying all around me, freezing to death, bleeding to death, scared to death." He paused, looked around the room. "You know how we survived. We looked out for each other. Didn't ask if the guy next to us had the right paperwork. Didn't check if helping him might cause problems later. We just helped, because that's what decent folks do." His eyes found Patterson. "I've known Tom Miller for 30 years, known that dog for 3 weeks. And I'll tell you this, that animal is braver than most men I've served with. Walked through a blizzard carrying puppies that weren't even his, just to give them a chance." He straightened. "You want to send him back to a man who beats him for fun, then you go right ahead. But you'll do it without me." He sat down heavily. The room was silent. Then someone else stood. A young woman, maybe 30, holding a little girl's hand. Tom didn't recognize her. "My daughter's been following this story," she said. "She asks me about Max every day. Wants to know if he's going to be okay." The little girl tugged her sleeve, whispered something. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "She wants to know if she can meet him. Wants to tell him she's praying for him." The meeting went on for another hour. More voices, more arguments, more tears. No resolution. But something had shifted. Tom could feel it. Lines had been drawn. February 21st. The response came. Not from people from paper. The Cedar Falls Gazette ran a front-page story. "Local family fights to keep rescue dog." Photographs of Max, of the puppies, of Tom and Sarah standing on their porch. The story was sympathetic, detailed. It laid out the facts: the blizzard, the rescue, the evidence of abuse, the lawsuit, and it named names: Wade Brennan, Dunmore County, 2 prior convictions for animal cruelty. Tom read the article 3 times. "This could help," he told Sarah. "Get people on our side. Or make Brennan angrier." She was right. By noon, the phone was ringing off the hook. Calls from reporters, from animal rights groups, from strangers who'd seen the story and wanted to help. And other calls. "You should be ashamed of yourself," one voice said. A woman, older, stealing a man's property and dragging his name through the mud. "The Bible says thou shalt not steal." Tom hung up. The phone rang again. "Hey, dog lover." A man this time, younger, laughing. "Heard you like animals. Maybe I'll come visit. Show you what I think of people who steal other folks' property." Tom hung up. The phone rang again. Sarah unplugged it from the wall. "We don't need to hear any more," she said. February 23rd. The tide turned. Tom was in the barn. They didn't have animals anymore, but he used it for storage when he heard the car pull up. He walked outside. A woman was getting out of a sedan. 50-something, professional clothes, a camera around her neck, a notepad in her hand. "Mr. Miller?" I'm Rachel Torres, Channel 7 News, Des Moines. I'd like to talk to you about your dog. Tom's first instinct was to say no, but Sarah had appeared on the porch. She was nodding. Come inside, Sarah said. I'll put coffee on. The interview lasted 2 hours. Rachel Torres was thorough, professional. She asked about Max's condition when they found him, about Dr. Hayes' findings, about Brennan's history. She asked to see Max. Tom brought him out. The dog was nervous as strangers still made him anxious, but he sat beside Tom's chair, leaned against Tom's leg. He trusts you, Rachel said. Took a while. After what he's been through, trust doesn't come easy. Rachel took photographs. Max by the fire, Max with the puppies, Max looking up at Tom with those patient, knowing eyes. This is going to be a big story, she said as she was leaving. National. Maybe. Are you ready for that? Tom looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Tom. We didn't ask for any of this, Tom said. We just opened a door. Sometimes that's how the biggest stories start. She drove away. That night, the segment aired. Tom and Sarah watched it on the old television in the living room. Max lay at their feet. The puppies were asleep in their nest. The segment was 6 minutes long. Footage of their house, of Max, of Dr. Hayes explaining the injuries, of Brennan's mugshot from his prior arrests, and testimony from neighbors, Frank Novak, his voice steady, Pastor Mitchell, his words measured, the young mother from the town meeting, her daughter's face visible behind her. This dog walked through a blizzard to find help. The segment concluded. Now a community is rallying to make sure he doesn't have to go back to the man who made him run in the first place. The phone they'd plugged it back in rang. Sarah answered, listened. Her face changed. Thank you, she said. Thank you so much. She hung up. What? Tom asked. That was the station. They've already gotten 200 calls. People wanting to help. People wanting to donate. Her voice cracked. Tom, people care. They actually care. Max lifted his head. His tail wagged. Slowly, carefully, like he was starting to believe it too. February 28th, 1 week before the hearing. The donations had reached $47,000. More than enough for legal fees. More than enough for whatever came next. Letters poured in from across the country. From dog lovers. From abuse survivors. From people who'd never met a German Shepherd in their lives but who saw something in Max's story that touched them. You're not alone, the letters said, over and over. We're with you. Tom read every one. Some nights, after Sarah was asleep, he'd sit by the fire and read them aloud to Max. This one's from Oregon, he'd say. Lady named Margaret. She had a rescue dog too. Says Max reminds her of him. Max would listen, his ears twitching, his tail moving in that slow, careful wag. This one's from a kid in Florida, 10 years old. Drew you a picture. Tom would hold up the crayon drawing a brown dog with a red heart on its chest, and Max would sniff it. See, you're famous. Boy. Famous. The word felt strange. 3 months ago, Tom had been invisible, a retired firefighter waiting out his days, a man without purpose. Now his face was on television. His name was in newspapers. Strangers sent him money and prayers and crayon drawings, all because he'd opened a door. March 3rd. 2 days before the hearing, Tom and Sarah drove to Des Moines. Patricia Cowell's office was busier than the last time. More files, more papers, an assistant Tom hadn't seen before, running copies in the corner. We've got a strong case, Patricia said. Stronger than I expected. She spread documents across her desk. Dr. Hayes' medical records, prior complaints against Brennan from 5 different neighbors, his arrest records, his plea deals, and this, she held up a folder. Testimony from a former employee, man named Carl Dietrich, worked on Brennan's property for 6 months in 2020. He's willing to testify about what he saw. Tom's heart lifted. What did he see? Everything. The chains, the beatings, the dogs that disappeared when they got too broken to be useful. Patricia's jaw tightened. Dietrich quit when Brennan told him to shoot a German shepherd who'd stopped eating. He refused. Brennan fired him, threatened him, said he'd make his life miserable if he talked. Why's he talking now? Because of the news coverage, because he saw Max's face on television and couldn't stay quiet anymore. Patricia set down the folder. His testimony could change everything. Tom looked at Sarah. Her eyes were wet. So, we might win, she said. We might. Patricia's voice was careful. But Brennan's lawyer is good. He's going to argue that Dietrich is a disgruntled former employee, that his testimony is biased, that the medical evidence could have happened before Brennan owned Max. But it didn't. We know that. Proving it is something else. The meeting lasted 4 hours. When they left, the sun was setting over Des Moines. The sky was pink and orange and gold. Tom held Sarah's hand as they walked to the car. 2 more days, he said. 2 more days. They drove home in silence. Max was waiting when they arrived. His tail wagging, his eyes bright. Hey, boy. Tom knelt down. Let Max press against him. We're almost there, just hold on a little longer. Max licked his face. Just once. But it was enough. March 4th, the night before, Tom couldn't sleep. He went downstairs at midnight, found Max already awake, lying by the fire. Can't sleep either. Huh. Max's tail twitched. Tom sat on the floor beside him, his back against the couch, his hand on Max's head. I've been thinking, Tom said, about what happens tomorrow, about whether we'll win or lose. The fire crackled. The house settled. And I realized something. Tom's voice was quiet. Just for Max, just for this moment. Whatever happens in that courtroom, whether the judge rules for us or against us, you're not going back. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what it costs. Max lifted his head. His eyes found Tom's face. You found my door. You chose me, and I'm choosing you back. Tom's hand tightened on Max's fur. So, whatever comes tomorrow, we face it together. You and me, and Sarah and those 3 puppies you saved. We're family now, and family doesn't give up on each other. Max's tail wagged, slowly, steadily. Then he put his head in Tom's lap, and they sat there together, man and dog, waiting for dawn. March 5th, 6 o'clock. A.M. Tom woke to the smell of coffee. Sarah was already up, dressed in her navy blue dress, the one with the small white flowers, the one she wore to funerals and graduations and important meetings. I couldn't sleep either, she said. They ate breakfast in silence, eggs and toast, the meal they'd shared 10,000 times. Everything tasted like cardboard. At 7:30, they said goodbye to Max. Tom knelt beside the dog, looked into those patient, trusting eyes. We'll be back, he said. I promise. Max's tail wagged. He didn't know what today meant. Couldn't understand the stakes, but he understood something. He understood that Tom was scared. He pressed his body against Tom's legs, solid, warm, present. I love you, boy, Tom whispered. Then he stood and walked out the door. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, reporters in the back row, cameras outside on the courthouse steps. Tom and Sarah sat at the defendant's table with Patricia Cowell. Across the aisle, Wade Brennan sat with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. Brennan caught Tom's eye, grinned. Tom looked away. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Honorable Judge Margaret Sullivan presiding." The door opened. The judge entered. An older woman. Silver hair. Reading glasses perched on her nose. She took her seat. Surveyed the courtroom. "This is the matter of Brennan versus Miller," she said. "An emergency motion for return of property." She opened a folder. Read for a moment. Then she looked up. "Before we proceed," she said, "I've received an urgent communication from the State Attorney General's office regarding one of the parties in this case." Her eyes found Brennan. "Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to remain seated." Brennan's grin faltered. The courtroom doors opened. 2 men in suits walked in, and behind them Sheriff Ray Cooper, holding a pair of handcuffs. The courtroom erupted. Voices, chairs scraping, Brennan's lawyer on his feet, shouting objections. Judge Sullivan banged her gavel. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." The noise died slowly, reluctantly. Tom sat frozen. His hand found Sarah's under the table, squeezed. The men in suits walked down the center aisle. One of them pulled out a badge. "State Attorney General's office. Mr. Brennan, you're under arrest for felony animal cruelty. 12 counts." Brennan's face went white, then red. "This is ridiculous." He stood up. His chair toppled backward. "This is a setup. You can't just— Sir, I need you to place your hands behind your back." Sheriff Cooper moved forward. The handcuffs caught the light. "I want my lawyer. You'll have access to counsel at the county jail." The click of handcuffs. Metal on bone. Brennan's eyes found Tom across the courtroom. Wild. Furious. "This isn't over," he said. His voice was low, venomous. "You hear me? This isn't— Mr. Brennan." Sheriff Cooper's hand tightened on his arm. "Let's go." They led him out through the side door. His protests faded down the hallway. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Judge Sullivan removed her reading glasses, set them on the bench. "Well," she said, "I believe that changes things. The hearing was postponed, not canceled. Postponed." Judge Sullivan explained that with Brennan facing criminal charges, the civil case would need to be reevaluated. "This court is adjourned until further notice." Tom and Sarah walked out of the courthouse into chaos. Reporters surrounded them, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward their faces. "Mr. Miller, did you know about the state investigation?" "Mrs. Miller, how does it feel? Is Max safe now?" Frank Novak appeared at Tom's elbow. "This way. My truck's around back." They pushed through the crowd, into Frank's old Ford, away from the courthouse, the cameras, the noise. Tom sat in the passenger seat. His hands were shaking. Sarah leaned forward from the back. "What just happened?" Tom shook his head. He didn't have words. Frank drove them home without speaking. When they pulled into the driveway, Max was waiting at the window, his tail wagging, his face pressed against the glass. Tom got out of the truck, walked to the door, opened it. Max bounded out. Not at Tom past him. To Sarah. He pressed against her legs, whining, his whole body wiggling with relief. Sarah dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around his neck. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay, boy. We're home." Tom stood in the doorway, watching. It was over. Wasn't it? It wasn't over. Not really. The criminal charges against Brennan made the news that night. Local, then regional, then national. Iowa man arrested on multiple animal cruelty charges. Rescue dog's journey leads to owner's downfall. Community's fight ends in justice. The story spread faster than Tom could track. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, well-wishers, strangers who'd seen Max's picture and wanted to offer support. Tom stopped answering. The attention should have felt like victory, should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt like pressure, a weight on his chest that wouldn't lift. March 7th. The letters to the editor started again, not all of them supportive. While we're glad the dog is safe, let's not forget the Millers broke the law. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Easy to be a hero when the cameras are rolling. Where were these concerned citizens when Brennan's neighbors were filing complaints that went nowhere? The Millers got lucky. Brennan got caught. But what about the next time? What about all the animals suffering right now while we pat ourselves on the back? Tom read them at the kitchen table, his coffee growing cold. Sarah came in, saw his face. "Don't," she said. "Don't what? Don't do that to yourself. Don't let them take this away from us." Tom set down the paper. "They're right, though. Some of them. We got lucky. If the state investigation hadn't been happening already, if Brennan's other victims hadn't come forward, but they did. And he's in jail. And Max is safe. For now." The words hung between them. Sarah sat down across from him. "What's wrong?" "Tom, we won. Why do you look like we lost?" Tom stared at the table. The same table where they'd made every decision, faced every crisis, celebrated every victory of their married life. "Because I almost gave up," he said, finally. "There were moments you didn't see when I was ready to write that letter, ready to hand him over, ready to let Brennan win just to make it stop." Sarah was quiet. "I didn't," Tom continued, "but I almost did. And if I'd given up a week earlier, a day earlier, Max would be gone. The state investigation wouldn't have mattered. He'd be back with Brennan, and we'd have told ourselves it was out of our hands." His voice cracked. What kind of man almost gives up on something like that? Sarah reached across the table, took his hands. The kind of man who's human, who gets scared, who doesn't know if he's strong enough. Her grip tightened. "You didn't give up. Tom, that's what matters. You stayed in the fight. Barely. Barely is enough. Barely is everything." She leaned forward. "You want to know what I saw? I saw a man who was terrified and kept going anyway, who faced down a bully when every instinct told him to run, who held that dog every night and promised him it would be okay. Even when he didn't believe it himself." Her eyes were wet. "That's not weakness. Tom, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Tom couldn't speak. Sarah stood, walked around the table, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "We won," she whispered. "Let yourself feel it." But the world wouldn't let them rest. March 10th. The backlash arrived in force. Someone had hired people. Tom didn't know who Brennan's family, maybe, or supporters who believed in property rights over animal welfare. But suddenly the narrative was shifting. The Cedar Falls Gazette ran a balanced piece. Both sides of the Miller dog controversy, legal experts discussing property law, anonymous neighbors expressing concern about vigilante justice. A clip of Brennan from before his arrest played on local news, smiling. Friendly, a regular guy who just wanted his dog back. Next to footage of Tom refusing to comment to reporters, looking tired, looking old. The segment ended with a question, "Heroes or lawbreakers, you decide." Tom watched it in the living room. Max at his feet, the puppies asleep in their nest. The phone rang. Sarah answered, listened. Her face went pale. "Thank you for letting us know," she said. She hung up. "What?" Tom asked. "That was Janet Walsh. Animal control. Sarah's voice was strange, hollow. Someone filed a complaint against us. Anonymous. Claims we're running an unlicensed animal rescue operation, that we're hoarding dogs in unsanitary conditions. Tom's stomach dropped. That's ridiculous. I know. Janet knows, but she has to follow up. It's procedure. Sarah sat down heavily. She's coming by tomorrow. To inspect. March 11th. The inspection. Janet Walsh arrived at 9 a.m. Her face was apologetic. I'm sorry about this. Folks, I know it's nonsense, but I have to document everything. She walked through the house, checked the puppy's living area, examined Max, took photographs. Everything looks fine, she said. Better than fine? Actually, these animals are well cared for. Then why? Because someone wants to make your life difficult. Janet lowered her voice. This complaint is harassment, pure and simple, but I have to file a report, and that report becomes public record. And once it's public, the papers get it. Tom finished. Exactly. She left an hour later. Tom stood on the porch, watched her car disappear down the road. The morning was cold, gray clouds gathering on the horizon, a storm coming. This was what they were doing now. Brennan was in jail, but his supporters were still fighting, filing complaints, spreading rumors, trying to destroy what they couldn't take by force. Death by 1,000 cuts. Tom went inside. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. We can't keep doing this, she said without looking up. I know. Every day it's something new, some new attack, some new crisis. I'm exhausted. Tom, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I jump every time the phone rings. Tom sat down across from her. What do you want to do? Sarah looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Older than they'd been a month ago. I don't know. I don't know anymore. She shook her head. Part of me wants to fight until we can't fight anymore. But another part of me... She stopped. Another part of you, what? Another part of me wonders if this is worth it. If one dog, even Max, is worth all of this. The words hung in the air. Tom felt them like a blow. You don't mean that. Don't I? Sarah's voice cracked. Look at us. Tom, look at what this is doing to us. We're prisoners in our own home. Afraid to answer the phone. Afraid to go into town. Afraid of our own neighbors. She stood up, walked to the window. I love that dog. I do. But I loved our life too. And our life is gone. Replaced by this war that never ends. Tom didn't move. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the windows, the sky darkening. So, what are you saying? His voice came out rough. You want to give up. Sarah didn't turn around. I don't know what I want. I just know I can't keep living like this. The silence stretched. In the living room. Max whined, a soft, questioning sound. He knew. Dogs always knew. Tom stood slowly, walked to his wife, put his hands on her shoulders. I'm tired too, he said. Tired and scared and angry, but I can't give up on him. I won't. Sarah's shoulders shook. I know, she whispered. I know you can't. That's what scares me. Why? She turned. Her face was wet with tears. Because I'm afraid this fight is going to kill you. Your heart. Tom, the stress. The doctors warned you. I know what the doctors said. Then why won't you listen? Why do you keep pushing yourself when you know, because some things are more important than living? The words came out before Tom could stop them. Sarah stared at him. You don't mean that. I do, Tom's voice was steady now, certain. I spent 32 years running into burning buildings, risking my life for strangers, because that's what the job required, because that's who I am. He took her hands. This is the same thing. Max needs me. The puppies need me. And I'm not going to abandon them just because it's hard. Just because it might hurt. Sarah's tears fell faster. And what about me? What about what I need? Tom's heart cracked. I need you too, he said. More than anything. But I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror. I need to know that when it mattered, I didn't run away. Sarah pulled her hands free. Maybe I need to run away, she said. Maybe I need a break from all of this, just for a few days, just to breathe. Tom felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Where would you go? My sister's, in Minnesota, just for the weekend. Sarah wiped her eyes. I need to think. Tom, I need to figure out if I can keep doing this. Tom stood very still. And if you can't? Sarah didn't answer. She walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs. Tom heard the bedroom door close. He stood alone in the empty kitchen, the rain falling harder now, thunder rumbling in the distance. Max appeared in the doorway, his eyes on Tom's face. It's okay, boy, Tom said. His voice sounded hollow, even to himself. March 12th. Sarah left. Tom drove her to the bus station. They didn't speak. At the platform, she turned. I'll call when I get there. Okay? She started to walk away. Stopped. Tom. Yeah, I love you. You know that, right? No matter what happens. Tom's throat tightened. I know. She got on the bus. Tom watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then he drove home. Alone. The house was too quiet. Tom moved through the rooms like a ghost. Fed Max, fed the puppies, checked the locks, stared out the window at the rain. The phone rang. He didn't answer. The mail came. Bills. More letters. He didn't open them. Night fell. Tom sat in the living room. Max at his feet. The puppies asleep. The fire crackled. The house settled. And Tom Miller, fire captain, husband. Father sat alone in the dark and wondered if this was how it ended. Not with a bang, not with a victory, with his wife on a bus to Minnesota, with his body failing, with a fight that had cost him everything. He looked at Max. The dog looked back. Those patient eyes. I don't know if I can do this alone, Tom whispered. Max's tail twitched. He stood up, walked to Tom, put his head in Tom's lap, just being there, just staying. Tom's hand found Max's head, the scars beneath the fur. Okay, Tom said, his voice breaking. Okay. Together. Then Max's tail wagged. Slowly, steadily. March 13th. The call came at 7 a.m. Tom was already awake. Hadn't slept. He picked up the phone. Mr. Miller, this is Patricia Cowell. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Quite the opposite. Her voice was different. Lighter. The state investigation found something. On Brennan's property. Tom's grip tightened. What did they find? 11 more dogs, all in various states of neglect. 3 had to be euthanized immediately. They were too far gone. Patricia paused. But that's not all. They found records. Documentation. Brennan was breeding and selling dogs, then mistreating the ones that didn't sell. It's a pattern going back at least 5 years. Tom sat down heavily. What does this mean for us? It means Brennan's facing additional charges, federal charges, possibly, if they can prove he was selling across state lines, Patricia's voice hardened. "And it means his civil case against you is dead. A man facing this many felonies isn't going to pursue a property dispute. His lawyer withdrew the motion this morning." Tom couldn't speak. "Mr. Miller, are you there? I'm here." His voice came out strange, thick. "You're saying it's over. Really over. Really over. Max is yours, legally and permanently. No one can take him away." Tom hung up. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd almost written the surrender letter, where he'd fought with Sarah, where he'd made every important decision of his married life. Max appeared in the doorway. His tail was wagging. Tom looked at him. "It's over, boy," he said. Max walked to him, put his head in Tom's lap. And Tom Miller, who hadn't cried since his father's funeral, put his head in his hands and wept. The phone rang again an hour later. Tom answered. "Tom, it's me." Sarah's voice. "I heard," she said. "It's all over the news. Brennan's been charged with—" "I know." Silence on the line. "Tom, I'm sorry. About what I said, about leaving. I was scared and tired and I know. It's okay. It's not okay. You needed me and I ran away. I'm so sorry." Tom closed his eyes. "When are you coming home?" "There's a bus at noon. I'll be back by supper time. I'll have dinner ready." A pause. "Tom? Yeah? I love you?" "I love you too." He hung up. Max was still beside him, still waiting. "She's coming home," Tom said. Max's tail wagged faster. Tom scratched behind his ears. "Come on, boy. We've got a lot to do before she gets here." They went outside together. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. And for the first time in weeks, Tom Miller felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. But as he stood in the driveway, breathing the clean morning air, a thought nagged at him. 11 more dogs, 11 more victims. Where would they go? Who would take them? Tom looked at Max, at the house, at the empty fields stretching toward the horizon. A new question formed in his mind, one that would change everything. Sarah came home at 5:47 p.m. Tom heard the car before he saw it, Frank Novak's old Ford. Engine knocking the way it always did. He'd asked Frank to pick her up at the bus station. Didn't trust himself to drive. He met her in the driveway. She looked tired, older than when she'd left 2 days ago, but her eyes were clear. "Tom," Sarah. They stood 3 feet apart. The distance felt like miles. Then she closed it. Her arms around him, her face against his chest, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for 2 days. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." Tom held her, breathed in the scent of her hair, the familiar lavender of her shampoo. "You came back," he said. "That's all that matters." Frank cleared his throat behind them. "I'll leave you folks to it." He tipped his hat. "Glad you're home. Sarah." He drove away. Tom and Sarah stood in the driveway, the evening light turning gold, the air warming with the first hints of spring. "Let's go inside," Tom said. "Max has been waiting." The reunion was everything Tom had hoped. Max met Sarah at the door, his whole body wiggling, his tail wagging so hard his rear end swayed back and forth. He pressed against her legs, whining, licking her hands. "Hey, boy!" Sarah knelt down. Let him wash her face with his tongue. "I missed you too." The puppies came tumbling out of the living room. 8 weeks old now, fat and healthy, eyes bright with curiosity. Hope the boldest climbed onto Sarah's lap immediately. Faith followed. Grace hung back, cautious as always, until Sarah reached out and scooped her up. "Look at you," Sarah murmured. Look how big you've gotten." Tom watched from the doorway. This was what they'd been fighting for. Not legal victories, or newspaper coverage, or donations from strangers. This moment, this family, this home. They ate supper together. Pot roast, Tom's mother's recipe. He'd spent the afternoon preparing it partly because he needed something to do with his hands, partly because he knew Sarah loved it. The meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. The carrots were soft, the potatoes golden, the gravy rich and thick. Sarah bowed her head before they ate. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for bringing us through this trial. And thank you," her voice cracked, "thank you for this stubborn old man who wouldn't give up. Amen." Tom's eyes were wet when she finished. "Amen," he said. They ate in silence, the comfortable silence of 40 years, the silence of two people who didn't need words. When the plates were clean, Sarah pushed back from the table. "I need to tell you something." Tom's stomach tightened. "What?" "I did a lot of thinking. On the bus? At my sister's?" She met his eyes. "I was wrong to leave. Wrong to say what I said. This fight, Max, the puppies, all of it, it's not just your fight. It's ours. And I abandoned you when you needed me most. Sarah, let me finish." She held up her hand. "I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of what this stress was doing to your heart. And I let that fear make me selfish." She stood, walked around the table, took his hands. "I'm not running anymore. Whatever comes next, we face it together, you and me and Max and those puppies. No more buses to Minnesota, no more breaks. We're in this until the end." Tom pulled her into his arms. "Until the end," he said. The next morning, Tom called Patricia Cowell. "I've been thinking," he said, "about those 11 dogs they found on Brennan's property. What about them? Where are they now? County shelter, most of them, the ones that survived." Patricia's voice softened. "It's not ideal. They're overwhelmed, understaffed, but it's the best option right now." Tom looked out the window, at the fields, the barn, the empty land stretching to the horizon. What if there was another option? Silence on the line. "Mr. Miller, what are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet. Let me make some calls. I'll get back to you." He hung up. Sarah was standing in the doorway. "I heard," she said, and she walked to him, stood beside him at the window. "We've got 60 acres, she said. "Most of it sitting empty. That barn hasn't been used for anything but storage in 20 years. It would take money, a lot of money. We've got $47,000 sitting in an account right now. Money people donated because they believed in what we were doing." Tom turned to look at her. "You're serious?" "I'm serious." Sarah's eyes were bright. "We saved Max. We saved the puppies. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe there's more we could do." Tom thought about the letters, the hundreds of letters from people who'd been touched by Max's story, people who wanted to help but didn't know how. He thought about the dogs in that county shelter, the ones Brennan had broken, the ones waiting for someone to give them a second chance. He thought about the empty house, the empty nest, the purpose they'd been searching for since Jake left. "We'd need help," he said. "Volunteers, veterinary support. We couldn't do it alone." "We wouldn't be alone." Sarah took his hand. "We've got a whole community, people who showed up when we needed them. They'd show up again." Tom looked at Max. The dog was lying by the fire, watching them. His tail wagged slowly. "What do you think, boy?" Tom asked. "Ready to share your home?" Max's tail wagged faster. The meeting was held at the Methodist Church, March 20th, 2 weeks after Brennan's arrest. Tom stood at the front of the room, his hands shaking slightly. He'd never been comfortable with public speaking. The basement was packed, standing room only, more people than had been there for the town meeting 6 weeks ago. "Thank you all for coming," Tom said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I know you're busy. I know spring planting's coming up. But Sarah and I have an idea we wanted to share." He looked at his wife. She nodded. "When Max showed up on our porch, he was dying, starving, broken in ways we couldn't see." Tom paused. "But he didn't give up. He carried 3 puppies through a blizzard to find help, because that's what he was, a helper, a protector, even when he had nothing left." The room was silent. "Brennan's property is being seized by the state. 11 dogs were found there. 8 survived. Right now, they're in the county shelter, waiting for someone to take them in." Tom took a breath. "Sarah and I want to build a sanctuary, a place where dogs like Mac's dogs who've been hurt, abused, abandoned, can heal, can learn to trust again, can find the families they deserve." Murmurs swept through the crowd. "We've got 60 acres. We've got donations. What we don't have is the knowledge or the manpower to do this alone." Tom looked around the room. "That's why we're here, to ask for your help." Silence. Then Frank Novak stood. "I don't know much about dogs," he said, "but I know construction. Built my own house 40 years ago. Reckon I could build some kennels." A ripple of laughter. Dr. Hayes stood next. "I'll provide veterinary care, pro bono, for any animal that comes through." Pastor Mitchell rose. "The church will organize volunteers. We'll spread the word to other congregations." One by one, people stood, offering skills, time, resources. The hardware store owner, Gerald Patterson, who'd crossed the street to avoid Tom just weeks ago, stood last. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about a lot of things. But I'd like to make it right." He paused. "I'll donate all the lumber you need. Whatever it takes." Tom's throat tightened. He looked at Sarah. Her eyes were wet. "Thank you," Tom said. "All of you. This means—" His voice broke. "This means everything." The meeting ended with handshakes and hugs and promises, and something Tom hadn't felt in a very long time. Community. Construction began April 1st, the first day of spring. Tom stood in the yard, watching volunteers swarm across his property. Frank Novak directing a crew of young men, Pastor Mitchell organizing supplies, Dr. Hayes walking the grounds with a clipboard, planning the medical facilities. Sarah came to stand beside him. "Second thoughts." Tom shook his head. "This is right. I can feel it." Max appeared at his feet. Grace trotting along behind, she'd become his shadow, following him everywhere. "What do you think?" "Boy?" Tom asked. Max's tail wagged. He lifted his nose to the wind, sniffed. Change was coming. He could smell it. The sanctuary opened June 15th. They called it Second Chance Farm. Sarah had wanted something hopeful, something that captured what they were trying to do. The first dogs arrived a week later, 3 of Brennan's victims, transferred from the county shelter, broken, scared, unable to trust. Tom worked with them every day. Patient, steady, the same way he'd worked with Max. Slowly, they healed. By September, 2 had been adopted, placed with families who understood what they'd been through, who would give them the patience and love they needed. The third, a female named Luna. The most damaged of the group stayed. "She's not ready," Tom said. "Might never be ready." "Then she'll stay with us," Sarah said. Luna slept in the barn now, close to the other dogs, but not too close, learning, at her own pace, that not all humans were monsters. Max visited her every day, would lie outside her kennel, just being present, just showing her that it was okay. Dogs healed dogs. Tom learned, sometimes better than humans could. October came. The leaves turned gold and red. Tom was in the barn, checking on Luna, when Frank Novak appeared. "Got a minute?" Tom walked outside. Frank looked older than he had in spring, but his eyes were bright. "I want to show you something." They drove in Frank's truck to the edge of the property, to the new building that had been finished last week. A small house, single story, room for a family. "Who's this for?" Tom asked. "You." Frank's voice was gruff. "Sarah, too. The big house, you've given it over to the dogs. Mostly. Volunteers coming and going all hours. You too need a place of your own." Tom stared at the house. "Frank, this is too much. We can't accept—" "Yes, you can." Frank's hand landed on Tom's shoulder. "You gave me hope. That puppy," his voice cracked. "She saved my life. Tom, after Barbara died, I was just waiting to join her. Hope gave me a reason to keep going." He wiped his eyes roughly. "This house is nothing compared to what you gave me. So just say thank you and be done with it." Tom looked at the house, at his friend. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." They stood in silence. Two old men, survivors of different wars. "Barbara would have loved this," Frank said finally. "She would have been in charge of it by now," Tom said. Frank laughed. The first real laugh Tom had heard from him in years. "Darn right she would have." Christmas came. The farmhouse was full of noise. Volunteers and their families, Dr. Hayes with her partner, Pastor Mitchell and his wife, Frank Novak with Hope padding at his heels, and Jake. Tom's son had come home for the holidays. First time since the summer. He'd heard about the sanctuary, about everything that had happened. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said. They were standing on the porch, watching the chaos inside. "Both of you." Tom sipped his coffee. "We're just doing what needs to be done." "That's what you always say." Jake shook his head. "But this is different. This is—" He searched for the word. "This is a legacy." Tom looked at the yard, at the kennels, at the dogs and the people and the life they'd built from nothing. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's just what happens when you stop being afraid." Jake put his arm around his father's shoulders. "Whatever it is, I'm glad I got to see it." They went inside together. Sarah was in the kitchen, directing traffic. The turkey was almost ready. The table was set for 20. Max lay in his usual spot by the fire. Grace curled against his side. Tom looked around the room, at all the faces, all the lives that had intersected with theirs. 1 year ago, he'd been ready to sell this house, ready to give up. Now he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. That night, after everyone had gone, Tom and Sarah sat on the porch. The stars were out, bright and clear, the Milky Way visible in a way it never was in summer. "Quite a year," Sarah said. "Quite a year." Max appeared at the door, pushed through, lay down at Tom's feet. His muzzle was grayer than it had been. A year of stress, even good stress, had aged him, but his eyes were clear, calm, content. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Tom said. "What?" "That morning, when you found him on the porch." Tom shook his head. "What if you hadn't opened the door? What if you'd called animal control like I said?" Sarah was quiet. "Then none of this would exist. The sanctuary, the volunteers, the dogs we've helped." Tom looked at Max. "All because you opened a door." Sarah reached over, took his hand. "We opened it together." Tom smiled. Yeah, we did. They sat in silence, watching the stars. Inside, Grace was barking, one of the other dogs answering. The symphony of their new life. Tom, yeah, I'm glad we didn't give up. Tom squeezed her hand. Me too. Max's tail twitched. Somewhere out there, in shelters and backyards and dark corners where people didn't look, other dogs were waiting for someone to open a door. Tom looked at the stars, at his wife, at the dog who had changed everything. We've got more work to do, he said. Sarah nodded. I know. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of snow. Winter was coming. But this time, they were ready. 1 year later, January 28th. Tom stood on the porch at 5:47 a.m., a cup of coffee warming his hands. The anniversary. 1 year since Sarah had found Max on this very spot. 1 year since everything changed. The farm looked different now. The old barn converted to kennels, a new building for medical care, fenced areas where dogs could run and play, a small house at the edge of the property where Tom and Sarah lived. 15 dogs called Second Chance Farm Home right now. Some would be adopted eventually. Others would stay forever, too broken, too scared, too damaged by what humans had done to them. But they were safe. They were loved. That was enough. Max appeared at Tom's elbow. His muzzle was almost entirely gray now. He moved slower than he used to, but his eyes were the same patient, watchful, full of quiet wisdom. Morning, boy. Max's tail wagged. Slowly, steadily, Tom reached down, scratched behind his ears. 1 year, he said. Can you believe it? Max leaned against Tom's leg. They stood together, watching the sun rise over the fields. The celebration started at noon. Sarah had insisted on marking the anniversary, had invited everyone who'd been part of the journey. Frank Novak arrived first. Hope, bounding beside him, a full-grown dog now, healthy and strong. She'd become his constant companion, his reason to get up in the morning. Tom, Frank shook his hand. Hell of a year. Hell of a year. Dr. Hayes came next. Faith trotting at her heels. The clinic's unofficial mascot. Children who came in scared of needles forgot their fears when Faith licked their fingers. She's getting too comfortable, Dr. Hayes said. Demands belly rubs from every patient. Sounds about right. Pastor Mitchell arrived with 3 families from the congregation. Each had adopted a dog from the sanctuary. Each had a story to tell about how their lives had changed. The county shelter sent representatives. The state attorney general's office sent a letter of commendation. A reporter from Channel 7, Rachel Torres, who'd covered the original story, came to do a follow-up piece. By 2 p.m., the farm was full of people. Tom stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the dogs play together in the yard, watching the families reconnect with animals they'd fostered or adopted, watching Sarah move through the crowd, hugging old friends, meeting new ones. This was what they'd built, not just a sanctuary, a community. The ceremony was simple. Pastor Mitchell said a few words. Frank Novak told a story about hope that made everyone laugh. Dr. Hayes gave an update on the sanctuary's first-year 47 dogs rescued, 32 placed in permanent homes, 15 still in residence. Then it was Tom's turn. He stood at the front of the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his voice rough. A year ago, I was ready to give up, he said. Ready to sell this house. Ready to spend whatever years I had left just waiting for the end. He looked at Sarah. Then a half-dead dog showed up on my porch, carrying 3 puppies he'd found on the road. Puppies that weren't even his. He looked at Max, and everything changed. The crowd was silent. I spent 32 years running into burning buildings. Thought I knew what courage looked like. Tom shook his head. I was wrong. Courage looks like a starving animal who stops to save 3 lives that aren't his own. Courage looks like a community that stands up when it would be easier to look away. His voice cracked. Courage looks like all of you. He had to stop. Couldn't continue. Sarah stepped forward, took his hand. What Tom's trying to say, she said, is thank you. For believing in us. For believing in Max. For showing us that when people come together, anything is possible. She raised a glass. To second chances. To second chances. The crowd echoed. Tom drank. The coffee was cold. He didn't care. The party wound down as the sun set. Families said their goodbyes. Volunteers headed home. Frank Novak was the last to leave. Hope sleeping in his passenger seat. Same time next year, he asked. Same time next year. Tom watched his taillights disappear down the driveway. Then he turned. The farm was quiet now. Just Tom and Sarah and the dogs. Max was sitting in the yard, watching the road, the same way he'd watched it that first week, waiting for Brennan to come back. But there was no fear in his posture now, just watchfulness, the habit of a lifetime, impossible to unlearn. Tom walked to him, sat down in the grass. His knees protested, his back ached, the cold ground seeped through his jeans. He didn't care. Good day, he said. Max's tail twitched. Good year. Max turned his head, looked at Tom. Those eyes, still patient, still trusting, still full of something that looked like love. I never thanked you properly, Tom said, for finding us, for choosing our door. He put his hand on Max's head. You saved my life, boy. You know that. Max leaned into the touch. I was dying, not physically well, that too, but inside, just going through the motions, waiting for the end. Tom's voice was rough. You gave me a reason to keep going. You and Sarah and those 3 puppies you carried through the snow. Max's tail wagged, slowly. So thank you for not giving up, for believing that someone would help, for being braver than I've ever been. Tom wrapped his arms around Max's neck, buried his face in the gray fur. Thank you, he whispered. Max stayed still, let himself be held, the way he'd learned to do, over a year of patience and trust and love. Sarah found them there an hour later. Tom sitting in the grass, Max pressed against his side, the stars coming out overhead. She didn't speak, just sat down beside them. Tom reached over, took her hand. Remember last year, she said, when I stood at that window and saw him on the porch. I remember. I almost didn't open the door. Did I ever tell you that? Sarah's voice was quiet. I saw him lying there and my first thought was, this isn't our problem. I almost turned around and went back to bed. Tom looked at her. What changed your mind? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. His eye, she said finally. One eye, looking at me through the glass. Not begging, not demanding, just asking a question. She looked at Max. Will you help them? Max's ear twitched at her voice. That question saved my life too, Sarah said, because I didn't know, until that moment, that I was dying inside, just like you, just going through the motions. She squeezed Tom's hand. Opening that door was the first real choice I'd made in years, the first time I felt alive. Tom pulled her close. We saved each other, he said. All 4 of us. All 4 of us. Max's tail wagged, Grace appeared from nowhere. She still did that. Materialized when you least expected her and squeezed between Tom and Sarah, her small body warm against their legs. The family. Together. Later that night, Tom couldn't sleep. Nothing unusual. He often woke at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., would lie in bed listening to Sarah breathe, listening to the sounds of the dogs in the barn. But tonight felt different. He got up, pulled on his robe, walked outside. The January air was cold. Not as cold as last year, no blizzard this time, but cold enough. His breath fogged in the darkness. Max was waiting on the porch. "Can't sleep either, huh?" Max's tail twitched. Tom sat down beside him. The same spot where it had all begun. The stars were bright overhead. The same stars his father had watched. His grandfather. 4 generations of millers on this land. And now this, a sanctuary, a mission, a purpose. Tom thought about Brennan. Still in prison, would be for years, his property seized, his dogs rescued, his cruelty exposed for the world to see. He thought about the 11 dogs they'd found on that property. 8 had survived. 6 had been placed in permanent homes. 2 Luna and a male named Shadow still lived at the sanctuary. Too damaged to trust, maybe too damaged ever to trust. But they were alive. They were safe. That was enough. Tom thought about the 47 dogs who'd passed through Second Chance Farm in the past year, 47 animals who'd been given hope, 32 who'd found families, 15 who'd found a home. Numbers, statistics, but each one was a life, a story, a creature who deserved better than what the world had given them. Tom looked at Max. "We did good, boy." Max's tail wagged. "But we're not done." "Are we?" Max lifted his head, sniffed the air. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, other animals were suffering. Other Brennans were hurting them. Other doors were staying closed. The work would never be finished. But that was okay. Tom had learned something this past year, something he'd known once, back when he was young and strong and running into burning buildings. You didn't do the work because you could finish it. You did it because it needed to be done. 1 more year, Tom said. Then another, for as long as we've got. Max put his head in Tom's lap. His breathing slowed. His body relaxed. The old dog was tired. They were both tired, but not too tired for 1 more year. The sun rose at 6:47 a.m. Tom was still on the porch, still sitting with Max. Sarah came out with 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Tom, sat beside him. Didn't sleep, didn't need to. They watched the light spread across the fields, gold and pink and pale winter blue. The dogs in the barn were waking up. Tom could hear them stirring, barking greetings to each other, starting their day. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, about next year, about what we could do differently." Tom sipped his coffee. "Like what? Like training programs, teaching people how to help dogs like Max, spreading what we've learned." Sarah's voice was thoughtful. "We can't be the only ones doing this. We're too old, too tired, but we could teach others." Tom considered this. A legacy. Something like that. Max's ear twitched. "What do you think, boy?" Tom asked. "Ready to be a teacher?" Max's tail wagged. "I'll take that as a yes." Sarah laughed. The sound carried across the yard. Tom looked at his wife, at the farm, at the dog who had started it all. "Okay," he said, "let's do it. Just like that." Just like that. Tom smiled. "What's the point of almost dying if you're not going to live?" Sarah leaned against him. "I love you." Tom Miller. I love you too. Sarah Miller? Max stood up, stretched, shook himself. Then he walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the farm, at the kennels, the medical building, the fenced yards where dogs would run and play, at the road that led to the world beyond. His tail wagged. Slowly, steadily, the sun climbed higher, the day warming. And Tom Miller, retired firefighter, husband, father, rescuer of dogs, sat on his porch with his wife and his dog and watched the morning unfold. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for this moment, this one quiet moment, he let himself rest, let himself breathe, let himself be grateful for Max, for Sarah, for the door that had opened when it would have been easier to stay closed, for second chances, for all of it. March came. Then April. The snow melted, the ground thawed. The first green shoots pushed through the brown earth. Tom planted a garden, his first real garden in 5 years. Tomatoes, cucumbers, beans. Max watched from the shade, too old now to help but too loyal to leave. The sanctuary grew, more volunteers, more donors, more dogs, more lives saved. Tom didn't count them anymore. The numbers didn't matter. What mattered was the work, the daily act of showing up, of opening doors. What mattered was the community they'd built, the friendships, the connections. What mattered was this moment and the next one, and the one after that. The future would come when it came. Until then, there was coffee to drink, hands to shake, dogs to comfort. Until then, there was life. April 15th, a Tuesday. Tom was in the barn, checking on Luna. When he heard the car, he walked outside. A young woman was getting out of a sedan. 20-something, dark hair, nervous eyes. "Mr. Miller, that's me." She stood by her car, not approaching. "I saw your story on the news, about Max, about what you're doing here." She swallowed. "I have a dog, a rescue. He's in the car. He's been through—" Her voice broke. "He's been through a lot." Tom walked toward her. "What's his name?" "Buddy." She wiped her eyes. "I've had him 6 months. Found him behind a dumpster. He was—" She couldn't continue. Tom looked at the car, a shape in the back seat, a pair of eyes, watching through the glass. "Bring him out," Tom said. "Let me meet him." The young woman opened the door. A German shepherd young, maybe 2 years old, too thin. Scarring around his neck crept out. His tail was tucked, his head low, his whole body screaming fear. Tom knelt down. "Hey, buddy!" The dog flinched. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Slowly, carefully. Buddy crept forward, sniffed Tom's outstretched hand. His tail twitched. Just once. Tom looked up at the young woman. "What do you need?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I love him, but I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to make him trust me." Tom stood up. "That's what we're here for." He led her toward the house, Buddy following cautiously behind. Sarah was on the porch, Max beside her. The old dog lifted his head, looked at Buddy. Something passed between them. Recognition. Maybe. Understanding. Max's tail wagged. Buddy's tail answered. Hesitant, uncertain, but there. "Come inside," Sarah said. "I'll put coffee on." The young woman followed her in. Tom stayed on the porch, watching the 2 dogs. Max walked slowly toward Buddy, sniffed him carefully. Buddy tensed, ready to run. Max sat down, not threatening, not demanding, just present, just waiting. Buddy's body relaxed, slowly, inch by inch. He sat down too, side by side. The old dog and the young one. Tom watched them, the cycle continuing, the work going on. One door opening, then another, then another. He went inside, put his arm around Sarah, looked out the window at the two dogs sitting together in the April sunshine. "You know what I realized," he said. "What? We're never going to be done. There will always be another Buddy, another Max, another door that needs opening." Sarah leaned against him. "Is that okay?" Tom watched Max lean over, touch his nose to Buddy's ear. The young dog's tail wagged, stronger this time. "Yeah," Tom said. "That's more than okay." Outside, the sun climbed higher. The dogs sat together, and the work continued. Some stories stay with us longer than others. This one may have settled somewhere quiet in your chest, a heaviness that doesn't ask to be explained, a tenderness you recognize but can't quite name. Perhaps it stirred something about doors you've opened, or ones you wished you had. Perhaps it reminded you of a time when you needed someone to see you, to choose you, when the world felt very large and very cold. Many of us have known that feeling, the waiting, the wondering if anyone will come. Some of us have been the one knocking. Some of us have been the one deciding whether to answer. And some of us have been both, in different seasons of a long life. If this story brought something to the surface, something unfinished, something tender, something you're still carrying, it's all right to let it rest there. Not everything needs to be understood. Not everything needs an ending. Some things just need to be held for a while. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.